Food is either medicine or it's poison. It's one or the other. So the best thing you can do to boost your immune system is to detox them. Your toxic load is high, your immune system's low. Like there's no way around that. Health is not the priority until you get sick, and then nothing else matters.
Welcome to the Health Insights Podcast. In this episode, we're joined by a holistic nutritionist and expert in nutrition response testing, Lakrista O'dell. She shares her transformative journey from traditional nursing to a more integrative approach to health, emphasizing the critical role of stress management and balanced living in achieving optimal wellness. Our guest discusses the difference between food sensitivity testing and food Zoomer testing, highlighting the importance of personalized nutrition. She also explores how emotional health impacts physical well-being and the necessity of addressing life's stressors for true healing. This show is brought to you by Thea Health, dedicated to empowering individuals to take control of their health and well-being. Visit theahealth.ai to learn more. Now, let's dive into today's enlightening conversation.
All right, let's get into it. What would you say, because you deal with a lot of clients, is the biggest challenge for getting patient outcome? Is there like one thing? Is it always the same thing? Is there a pattern? Like, where do you feel like people always get hung up on, or is it different?
I feel like it's different for everybody. Some people aren't willing to make dietary changes. That's a big one because of convenience. Everything is so convenient now. Like cooking 3 meals a day is not an option for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But even getting into like food prepping is a huge transition. But one thing that I feel like people feel like is out of their control, and to a certain extent, it just takes longer, I feel like, to get a grasp on, is stress. So people that are chronically stressed, first their cortisol's high, then they have low cortisol. It messes with their blood sugar, which it messes with their hormones and their thyroid tanks. And, it's a really big thing for women. So, there's so many more responsibilities now than there were a couple decades ago. I mean, women just stayed home and did everything at the house and took care of the kids. And now we're expected to do all of that plus 40 hours a week. And our kids are in 15 activities apiece, and like nobody lives like a chill life anymore. So I think that's really important and I try to do what I'm teaching my clients to do, is living a balanced life. Like you have to have a really good work-life balance where you're not working yourself into the ground, but you also have to work. And so I always tell people, like, it's not an overnight thing, but sometimes a job transition is in the cards for some people that are just, working themselves to death. Because I'm like, you can't take your job with you to the grave, and you can't take care of your kids if you're sick. So is that, it's kind of the same thing when everybody was taking the COVID vaccine, because they were like, oh, if I don't take it, I'm going to lose my job. I'm like, or you might die. Then you don't have to worry about it. Or you can develop cancer, which is, studies are showing that's what's happening now. Does your job matter when you can't work because you're going through chemotherapy? So I feel like the stress is one thing that keeps people sick, whether it's job related or relationship related. We do talk a lot about ending toxic generational patterns. Like sometimes to get well, you have to cut out people that are family.
Yeah.
You just have to. We vibrate at a certain frequency. I think it was Gary Brecka that I saw a clip that he did where they were isolating different frequencies, and like the highest was authenticity. So when they blocked everything out. So like there's being authentic, and if that person is not being supportive of who you are and what you're trying to do with your life, you have to make the decision, like, are they hindering where I'm trying to go? Yeah. And that can be like, if it has to do with God's plan, or just a health journey, because your health journey is really important to everything in life. It's like determining your longevity, Yeah. So I think stress in all the forms, family, work, kids, relationships or whatever, that's one of the biggest things to change.
Yeah.
Like I said, some people struggle with diet, some people struggle with taking supplements or going to the gym. But I would say stress is the one thing that's really tough
Yeah.
to get people to reel it in, because those are big life decisions and changes that have to be made.
Yeah. It's an interesting point, right? Because to what you were saying, there's multiple stressors in life, right? So it could be, I'm not getting along with my spouse. I don't like my job. The environment isn't the way that I would envision it. I don't like the way my kids are being treated at school. How would you go, or how do you go about approaching those? Like, let's say it's like my spouse is stressing me out. It's almost like, well, now you're a counselor to get that person healthy. And
Yeah.
does the other person also need to be involved? And we see this, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I wanted to do what the app was telling me or what the care plan was, but like my wife cooks, and so I'm just going to do what she does, and she thinks I'm getting too skinny.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. So the real problem isn't enough information, and people are just stressed about these things. So how do you approach that, right? Because you're not necessarily a psychologist, but you kind of are. So what's your approach, and maybe how often does your approach work versus not? And like, what do people actually need to do, and how do you make them do it?
So the first thing I always tell people with anxiety is, there's situational anxiety, and then there's anxiety that people are like, oh, it's random. So sometimes it's random because, it's a nervous system disruption and you don't really know what's causing it. It comes on for no reason. But if it's situational, most anxiety that's situational, you're having anxiety because you need to make a decision.
Yeah.
And you're procrastinating.
Yeah.
So I have a friend of mine that keeps coming to me and telling me the same situation over and over. And I said, I love you and I will support you in whatever this looks like moving forward. But do not bring me a problem, bring me a solution. Yeah. Like the problem that you're bringing me is still a problem because you have to do this or this. Like you can't stay here. That's why you're so anxious and stressed. You have to, sometimes people it's like go in and ask for a raise and cut your hours or quit your job. Like sometimes those are the things.
Yeah.
Or ask like, okay, this is what's stressing me out at my job. Take a resolution. Say, these are the options. It's just a decision that has to be made or an action that has to be taken. And procrastination is sometimes the culprit because people don't want to because it's uncomfortable. Our nervous system will resort back to what's familiar, not what's safe, because especially like people in toxic relationships, they'll leave and then they come back, even though they know it's bad. Our nervous system will default to like, at least I know in this situation what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Out here, it's unknown. I don't know. My nervous system freaks out when I go over here. So then I come back, even though I know that there are things that are going to happen. I know what those things are. So that's something educating people, like you're going to feel anxiety, but that's teaching them techniques to breathe through that and, cold exposure and breathing techniques and, going to the gym. Like I always say, like working out and getting outside in the sun are like the two most underrated antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications that you can have. Mm-hmm. Like I promise if you go run a couple miles, you're not going to feel near as anxious because you're not going to have the energy to probably, especially if that's something that's new for you. But, and it gives you time to yourself to like refocus those things. But, I'm not a counselor and I don't ever claim to be. We know things like emotion code or mind, body, spirit release. I have practitioners that I'll refer people to if I feel like they have some past trauma that is like actually interfering physically with their healing, because that can happen. And the emotion code is like a great book for people to like read about that and how past trauma, like even childhood trauma or trauma your mother went through while she was pregnant with you, can impact you now, like your physical state. So I do have people that I refer out to for that. But a lot of times it's me like directing them like, okay, I have a virtual client and her husband are not in a good place. Mm-hmm. They have 2 kids. She wants to have more. And so she had multiple miscarriages. And I kept telling her, like, I was telling her this is not a good time. Like she was trying. And I'm like, because a lot of people think like that's going to save the marriage. But I'm like, you're miscarrying because your body you're not in a safe place. You're not in a safe environment. Like your body doesn't feel like it can safely bring a child into this world. Things got better. And she ended up getting pregnant and she's in her 3rd trimester now. So things are better. But in the beginning, I was just like, this is just not a good time, and I recommended like, y'all need to get into counseling. And she was coming back and giving me feedback. And I'm like, okay, I don't feel like this counselor's a good fit. I feel like you need to switch. So they did. So I'll guide things like that, but I'm not ever going to be like, sit and have that counseling session because I'm not trained in that. I don't know how to navigate that, but I do refer them out to people and try to direct them like, okay, right now in your life, this is what I feel like physically your body can handle, or what you need to change so that your body can handle certain things. But we do see that a lot. Like stress is a big factor with miscarriage. Like if that baby doesn't feel safe, if your body doesn't feel like you can safely carry a child full term, you can miscarry because of that. So
No, it's honestly a great point. I want to call them colleagues, not really friends. So they were like gung ho about having a kid, and they were trying for 2 years. And it was the most annoying experience. Like I didn't want to hang out with them. So they'd be like, it's 2, 14, and 17 seconds. I'm fertile now. Let's go do 3.
I'm ovulating.
Yeah. It was like, I got to do 3 handstands. And in this position, we have to have sex because it's the most likely the sperm is going to get to the. And I was like, I don't think this is healthy. And I don't think this is a good approach. I actually told them, I said, you guys,
you're stressing way too much about it.
Your whole identity is like everything has to be perfect and get it done. And not like the body wants to be like relaxed and like, that it's safe in the woman's body to conceive. And I told them, they were kind of angry at me. And I was like, but I actually think this is the problem, right?
Yeah.
One day they gave up. They're like,
and then they got pregnant.
We can't have kids. Next week, hey, we're pregnant.
So this happens with people that go through like, they'll be like, oh, I didn't, IVF and that didn't work or whatever. And then they stop trying.
Right.
And they end up getting pregnant because the stress comes down. So, or they have a baby, even if it's through like IVF or whatever, and they end up getting pregnant immediately afterwards because like, you're happy, you're loving on a baby, like all your hormone levels are like, it's love, it's peace. And that's what you're feeling with, there are obviously stressors that come with the newborn, but now like I've brought this baby in, I can do this, my body is capable, boom, pregnant again, I'm like, I always tell people right after they're pregnant, I'm like, be really careful, even if you're breastfeeding, I know they say, but just saying, your body feels really safe and,
Yeah, I've heard that multiple times.
Yeah. So that is, I just think stress is a really big factor. And I think we need to be able to take charge of the things that are causing stressors in our life that people consider normal now. Like we're the only country that works 40 hours a week and takes 2 weeks vacation. Right. That is insane to me. Like you want me to work 5 days a week and spend 2 days a week with my children. And, because when I get home, I give them a bath and feed them dinner and put them to bed. And I see them for like maybe 30 minutes outside of doing those things, if at all. And so I just feel like as a society, we just have to, and it does take time to get things like that to a place where we have a healthy work-life balance. And it ultimately affects our health long-term. So.
Going back to that point, which I think is super valid, like women didn't used to work the way they are now. And on top of that, they have all the other responsibilities. And sure, like you can say it's a little bit more shared now. Like the husbands get into cooking and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that is really bad for society? Do you feel like you're seeing a lot of problems coming out of that? And would the traditional model maybe be healthier?
Like as far as women going out into the workforce?
Yeah.
I don't think that that's like detrimental to society. I think everybody has a gift and everybody's here for a reason. And so I don't feel like every person is made to be a stay-at-home mom.
Sure.
I've say this, I went through phases in my life. So I have 2 older kids that are 17 and 19. And when they were younger, I was like, I could not be a stay-at-home mom. I would go insane. I was a registered nurse. I was working in labor and delivery, and then I worked in home health, and I loved what I did.
Right.
And I couldn't imagine not having that part of my life. So I never had I had enough time with him. I was working 12-hour shifts, so I had plenty of days off, and it was a good balance for me. Yeah. But then my life shifted, and all of a sudden I was torn because I'm like, now I want to be home more,
Yeah.
and because I think part of that's you're older and, you know, things calm down a little bit. But I mean, now I have 2 little ones that I homeschool and I work 3 days a week and I homeschool them. And, we have a good support system that homeschools them on the other days. But I would have never considered that when my older 2 were little. I would have been like, oh, heck no. Like, there's no way I can stay home and homeschool these kids. So I think it's different phases of your life. Like, I think it's great for women to be able to stay home, for longer than the 4 to 6 weeks that we give them. I don't think that's near enough time for a baby to transition out of a womb into, the world. But I don't think it's a detriment to society. I think that part of the problem is that we have a lot of single parent families, moms and dads,
Yeah.
trying to do everything that was created to be shared, like you said. So I'm a single mom. I work and homeschool my kids, and I've got one that's a senior in high school and doing one that's in college, and so I've got kids spread out everywhere. So working 5 days a week would be horrible for my nervous system and my health overall, because then I would just be stressed because I'm missing everything with my kids. So I think the balance looks different for everybody. Like, I know people where the dad stays home and the mom goes to work because she's a doctor. She has a calling and he stays home with the kids, and that's great. Whatever works for the family, where everybody feels like they're doing what God called them to do. And whatever brings the stress to a manageable level. I hate to say low, because I feel like we just have to get it manageable,
Which is unfortunate that you as a provider and a healthcare practitioner are saying that, right?
Right.
It means that you're not seeing a path, or that really is where we're at a point where we can get it that low.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit sad, hearing that, because it's like, what would it take to get there? And it feels like it's this big burden, right? And this boulder. Cool. So what do you think it would take to get it low? Or is this too much of a multifaceted question where it's like,
I think
there's
that's
so
a
many
lot.
variables and everyone
scenarios. I mean, I think, like I said, like sometimes it's work, sometimes it's kids, sometimes it's, your relationships, in your home. Sometimes it's, extended family relationships. It looks different for everybody. I just always say, like, find that main stressor and mediate that one, figure out what you need to do to remove that stressor, or at least get it to a manageable level. But I feel like that's one of the biggest issues with women is stress. I mean, we have all these thyroid issues and like chronic fatigue because their adrenals are shot.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just the main thing is like we put so much pressure on ourselves to get everything done and take care of everybody.
Yeah.
Then we come last. And then, health is not the priority until you get sick. And then nothing else matters.
Yeah.
When you get that major diagnosis, then, like I said, what if you can't go to work? Health is the only thing that you want to be able to get those things back. So prioritizing your health so that you can keep all the things that you love and all the things that you want to do, being able to play with your kids and go to work if that's what you're called to do. But I think it's, like you said, I think it's a big question that has a lot of different angles. But like I said, just figuring out a way, whatever that looks like for each individual, to bring the stress level down is huge. So
well said. And I think you got it nailed there. Right? It's like everyone does have differences, but you're going to have some core stressor that if you can reduce that, it's going to light up a clear path for everything else.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. I do want to dive a little bit into, can you explain the difference between nutrition response testing and a holistic nutritionist? Because you're certified in both. And I think a lot of people would confuse that those are similar things or similar type of practitioner. And because you are an expert in both, I wanted to kind of flesh out what those two are and what the major differences are.
So for a holistic nutritionist, I'll back up and say, like, the food pyramid and what we were taught originally, like in nursing school or even in elementary school when they're teaching kids, that's all backwards. All of, we have big pharma, we also have big food. So like they're involved in the creation of all that. Like Coca-Cola is one of the biggest, contributors to, this research of like how to get our food to be addictive and that sort of thing. So I always just tell people like flip the food pyramid upside down. I wouldn't even say what I learned in my holistic nutritionist course are things that I would actually agree with. So there's holistic things, but then there's like, they talk about organic, but they don't really talk about like the dangers of glyphosate and where it's at and how to avoid it and that sort of thing. And it's just, I feel like the education system, I always tell people go through whatever you want to go through, whatever school, whatever training, whatever certification, get the certification. And then you're going to learn when you get there and you start getting your hands dirty and you go to events and you meet other people that are doing what you're doing. They've been doing it longer, and you're going to find mentors, and that's where you're going to learn when you get in the trenches. I'm not saying I didn't learn anything from that, but I would say the majority of that I don't use. It's things that I've learned along the way through doing like the difference in food sensitivity testing and food zoomer testing, and everybody's gut's different, and you may be sensitive to one food, but I'm not. And like a cookie cutter diet doesn't work for people. Nutrition response testing is a form of applied kinesiology or muscle testing that we use to determine what stressors are on the body. So what you're reacting with. We check, the strength of different organs as well. So being able to look at someone's gut health and say like, okay, right now you can't tolerate dairy, but like I'm a big advocate for raw dairy. I think most kids should be switched to raw dairy. And, dairy is inflammatory because it's pasteurized. So getting, milk straight from the cow, getting it from a dairy farm. I want kids on that. I think it's very nutritious, but temporarily their guts are so wrecked. Sometimes I'm like, okay, you have to avoid dairy for a little bit.
Yeah.
My son is one of those. We have to go off dairy periodically. It's caused him to get fluid behind his ears. And then I start having to yell at him. Then I'm like, okay, no cheese, But overall, I think a lot of the things that, you'll go to some, integrative physicians and they'll be like, everybody's gluten-free, dairy-free. Like, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think gluten in our country is hybridized and sprayed with glyphosate for the most part. We need to limit it very much.
Yeah.
But dairy, I don't necessarily feel that way about. It's not what I've seen clinically. So I think clinically, you start to gather more data outside of that. But yeah, holistic nutritionist is like information, on, how to eat to heal your body. Food is either medicine or it's poison. It's one or the other. And so learning what's poison for you might not be poison for me is something that I've really realized. It's like, people are like, what kind of diet do you recommend? I'm like, depends.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. There's not one thing that I would recommend across the board for anybody. It just looks different.
Yeah.
So.
Two really good things to pull out from that is I actually like the way you're positioning. It's either healing or poison. And that might not be even fully true. It's like it could be a spectrum of how good is it for you versus how bad is it for you.
Right.
But I think in terms of like personally, that's going to be the type of things that you do are going to be different than me, and figuring out what those are is the root of how you experiment with anything else. And so why should diet be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, like everybody gets into this tribalism of, okay, gluten is terrible, so we should never eat gluten. And I'm part of the no gluten club, and so therefore gluten should never be eaten. And then it yo-yos back to these people are stupid, gluten's fine, everyone in Italy eats it, right? And so then it becomes like tribal wars on what diet is best, and we all want to be part of that tribe. And so then it kind of snowballs from there. So I agree with that. Tell me a little bit, how are you doing the testing? Because I think people would be interested in knowing, how are you testing different organs to responses in order to figure out, like, say I'm your patient, how would you do that testing on me and extrapolate what's, let's call it poison for me versus healing me?
So as far as the foods, like we can test to what you react to muscle testing wise, but people have a lot of digestive issues. We do what's called a food zoomer test.
Yeah.
So food sensitivity testing is not the same as food zoomer testing. So food sensitivity is basically everybody in America has leaky gut. So any food that you eat that has a protein small enough to leak out of those tight junctions that have opened up is going to show up on your food sensitivity test. So you're going to get your food sensitivity test and be like, what in the hell? This is everything I eat. And that's because everything you eat is leaking out of your gut. And so I always tell people food Zoomer testing are really the only testing that I recommend as far as that, because it breaks down the protein into peptides and you can see specifically what peptides you're sensitive to. So for an example, going back to my son, so the food Zoomer test, you get like 4 or 5 food Zoomers, and then they do like a free food sensitivity test with it that has like a whole lot. Zoomers are like one specific food. Like you'll do a gluten Zoomer, a dairy Zoomer, egg Zoomer, whatever. And then they do a full food sensitivity panel. And I'm like, it is good information, but it's more temporary. So like these are the foods that are causing inflammation. I have antibodies to these right now. It's more of a temporary, avoidance, not as long-term as if something shows up on a Zoomer. So
Gotcha.
on my son's food sensitivity that came with the Zoomer test showed he was not sensitive to dairy. But on this dairy Zoomer, he was sensitive to like all but 2 peptides on that protein. So the reason for that is he's never been vaccinated. He's never had antibiotics. So his leaky gut score was very low. So he had nothing that was leaking out. So he didn't have antibodies to the whole dairy protein. So it wasn't going to show. So food sensitivity only tests the whole protein. If you don't have an antibody to that whole protein, then it's not going to show up. So that was the culprit he was failing his hearing screens. And this was like my last resort to try to figure out what the hell was going on. And we cut out dairy and all of a sudden the fluid behind his ears is gone. He passes his hearing screen. But I would not have ever caught that had I just done food sensitivity test. And that's why people are like, oh, I've done food sensitivity testing. I'm like, it doesn't mean anything to me. It just tells me what you're eating and that you have leaky gut. So with the muscle testing, in person, we'll use, like most of the time I have people lay down and hold their arm up because it's easier to hold your arm straight up than it is to stand in front of me and hold your arm straight out in front of you. For a long period of time, your arm gets tired fast that way. So people lay down and hold their arm up. And so we'll push on your arm. So you have what we call a locked muscle or a strong muscle. So I can push really hard and you'll be able to resist. So if I push on, say, your liver, if you're not a healthy person, and that's our body's main filter, most everybody's liver is what we call weak, or it doesn't have energy reserve or energy storage. So we'll push on that, push on your arm. Your arm's going to give a little bit because your body is going to pull energy to protect your vital organs. So I always explain it like hypothermia. You lose your fingers and your toes first because your body's pulling energy to protect your vital organs. So muscle testing works the same. Most people's arm doesn't like drop down. It just gives a little bit. So you can feel a lock or you can feel what we call an unlock where the arm is going to move. And then we have different vials that have frequencies of different things like different bacteria, different parasites, and we'll hold those close to your body and see if your arm reacts. So is that something that is impacting your body right now? And so that's what we use to produce what we call a bio-individualized protocol. So specifically what you're responding to. And there is a way, it gets a lot more technical through quantum physics, that you can do muscle testing virtually. So it's more of a frequency, or they call it resonating. So I do have virtual clients. With virtual clients, we usually do more lab work as well. So we have more of a comparison, and then that more solidifies it in their mind that we're going after the right things.
Yeah.
But still, like if they show up, they have high bacteria or they have parasites or, they have Epstein-Barr mono, whatever, or their total tox panel's high. We'll use resonating to figure out like, okay, what binder specifically does this person need? Because there's 10 different ones, right? So which one do they need? Do they need, a chelator? Do they need HMET? What do they need? And so we still use that even virtually to make sure that just because you have heavy metals, this product is not necessarily going to clear them from your system. It might clear them from mine, but might not clear them from yours.
Right.
Depending on where are those heavy metals. Are they in the soft tissue? Are they, circulating through your bloodstream? Have they made it to your brain? Do we need something that crosses the blood-brain barrier? That sort of thing. So everybody's got, even if I have like 5 or 10 people with the same issue, they may all need something different. And so.
Yeah. So I didn't tell you this, but I've actually done extensively that type of testing, and I didn't I'm very open, so I never went in thinking this is not going to work.
Right.
I was very much like, if this helps, I'm very
open to it. Yeah.
And open to it. And I was like, lock. My arm was locked. And then I think at that time it was actually egg. My arm dropped like a flop. Like it was just like an immediate boom. And I was like, I really didn't, I tried to hold up my arm.
You can't, yeah.
You can. And it was just it was like, you can't believe it until you see it or you experience it. And people were like, oh, that's, voodoo stuff. If you're going to a witch doctor, it's not actually going to work. And I was like, my perspective isn't that perspective. If I'm willing to try something, and then if I feel like this isn't worth my time, I'm going to pull back, but I'm not going to go into it saying that it's not going to work. Because to your point, when I was sick, all I cared about was getting better.
Whatever works.
And I was smiling when you mentioned that, because I was like, the saying is the most true. You got 99 problems and health isn't one, until health is a problem. And then it's the only.
Exactly.
Right. And then it's like, you don't really care about it. And it's like, I think the best maybe proxy to that saying is when you're like food poisoned and you're throwing up, everybody prays to God in that situation. I know I've always been like, just get me better. I'll give you all my money.
I'll do anything.
Yeah, I'll like all my material possessions.
Yeah.
Just let me feel better.
Yeah.
And then you feel a little bit better. You're like, well, I'm not going to give you all my money. And I'm not going to give
I mean, I was just saying. Yeah.
And the next day you're like, well, I just need a shower and I'm fine.
Yeah.
I don't need to. But it's like, in that moment, that's not true.
You're going to give everything.
You would want, right?
Right.
You feel better. And this is human nature. Just another quick story on that is and you don't know this about me, but I came from a war-torn country and I was a refugee. And there was this guy that my dad knew, and he was locked up. Like, the opposite side got him and they locked him in a basement. And for a long time, I think it was like a year and a half. And when he was in that cell, he told his story, and it was like, he would every day go, I don't need anything in my life. I just want to be outside the cell. Like, I don't need to interact with people. I just want to be free. Like, that would be so cool if it happened. So he finally got let go. And then he's like, when he was free, he goes, well, I do smell a little bit. So it'd be nice to take a shower. Right. And then take the shower. And then he's like, my hair does look a little bit off. So it'd be nice to get a haircut. As a haircut. He's like, it would be nice to like generate some income and be able to experience it. So it was like within the span of a week, he was like, hell no, I would not need to live, herding sheep in a mountain by myself. That's stupid. Of course, I'm going to go into the world and do it around. But it's like, in the scenario that you are,
you're willing to give anything.
Willing to give everything. And you don't think like that until you're reminded.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the human things that I've always wondered about. Is like, how do you force yourself to be mindful of those things? Because you just get lazy, because your brain just loves to be in a state of, why are you doing just let's go to laziness and comfort and everything is fine until it's not. And then it's in panic mode. And you're like, well, had we just been a little bit more careful, this wouldn't be the issue.
Yeah.
So anyway, just wanted to point out that I think that was a really great point that you brought up.
So with you saying about the witch doctor and people saying like, oh, this is like, I've been called like a witch doctor, voodoo witch doctor, voodoo doctor, all these things. And most of it's like in good fun from my clients. Like nobody, I mean, I'm sure people say that, but not to me, in like a negative way. But it's like I have a friend, and that's how I'm saved in his phone. It's voodoo doctor. And so I always, when people ask, I always get the question like, are you Christian? Do you believe in God? And I'm like, it's hard for me to like fathom that people think that this is not God's design, because we're all, like I've said, we're all vibrating at a frequency. Molecules move. Like in basic science, they teach you that everything has a frequency. Like when you get in someone's, like I always say, I put earbuds in and they're like Bluetooth. If I'm not wearing my wired ones, like I should, it causes me like ear pain. Like it makes my ear, it doesn't do that to everybody, but I'm like, that is a frequency.
Yeah.
A bad one. Like people generate good frequency or bad frequency. So like I have these kits, everything has different frequencies. Like we react to that. And that is God's design. Like it's not like, and people will say stuff about crystals, which I have like a selenite necklace because it blocks EMF. But I'm not like carrying crystals for prosperity and things like that. But I'm like, just like food has a frequency, so you can resonate with it or not. Those are things created by God for certain things. Like some of them do block, negative energy, like radiation, EMFs and things like that. So just like I'll put supplements on people's body to see how they respond, because each supplement has a different frequency. A lot of those are food-based supplements, food created by God. They all have different frequencies. So we're just trying to figure out what resonates with you and what is your body rejecting to try to get your energy filled where you can heal, essentially.
Yeah. let's go down that path. A lot of people would say what you're doing is witch doctor, frequency
Yeah.
doesn't matter. This is stupid. This is not backed by science. And I've never been that type. I always look at both sides and make
Yeah.
a decision. And I'll actually try both sides and make a decision. And I'm like, even if it's placebo and I'm not feeling well and it works,
Yeah.
then it did the job, right? So I'm very much not a tie myself to anything. I'm trying to look at things critically. And I know I still make emotional decisions, but I try to mitigate the amount of emotional decisions that I'm
Right.
making to get to the result, whether it's for me, family member, friend, business, etc. But what, in your opinion, is the reason you get so much pushback for the type of work that you do, for the results that you can get your clients? Empirical, lots of empirical evidence, right? But if somebody
Yeah.
is not feeling well and they feel better, why do you think you've had so much pushback? And I know we'll get into this in a little bit, not to go over time, but I know you came from a registered nurse background.
Mhm.
So you went through training in the medical field
Oh, yeah.
traditionally. So let's unpack that a little bit. Like, where is your viewpoint on that? Like, what makes people so, and it's visceral. It's not
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that's fine if you want to go to that type of doctor. We kind of support it or don't. It's like, that's literally snake oil and you're getting scammed to death and you're an
Yeah.
idiot if you do that. Like, that's the type of reaction then.
So I think it's because people can't see it and they don't understand it.
Yeah.
We're automatically, like I said, your nervous system's going to reject anything that's unknown because it doesn't know if it's safe. And so our immediate response is to reject it.
Yeah.
But it's quantum physics. And I always say, if someone says that they understand quantum physics, they don't understand quantum physics, because like it's so in depth. Like you can take an atom and cut it in half. You know, have part of it in China and part of it in California. And if you mess with one, the one halfway across the world is going to respond because they are quantumly entangled. We are all energetically connected. And that's science. That's not woo-woo, anything. That's actual science. And so I think it's just that people don't understand it. I honestly think people are waking up to it. People are more aware of the frequencies of things, of grounding and things like that. I think people are becoming more aware. But yeah, I mean, as a registered nurse, I drank the Kool-Aid, did everything the medical system told me to, and I was so sick. I always say, like, looking back, then you always see like why you had to go through certain things to get to where you are. And I think had I not been so sick twice in my life and been saved by muscle testing, I probably wouldn't be a believer. But the Lord didn't have to do it once. He had to do it twice for me to be like, oh, maybe the medical system isn't working out for me, So the first time I was 17, muscle testing identified a gas leak in our house. I'd been in the hospital for like several days. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
So my mom takes me to this witch doctor,
Yeah.
She finds out that we have a gas leak, and later I find out I have MTHFR mutation. So that's the reason I was the only one in the house that was sick. I think I just wasn't able to detox at the rate that they were, and it was a slow leak. And so it just compounded and it built up, and my toxic bucket overflowed, and I was the one that was sick. So I got well. Fast forward a whole decade, I get sick again. Lots of autoimmune type symptoms like joint pain and like lupus, RA type stuff. And I hate to diagnose because I feel like a diagnosis is just an umbrella they put over a bunch of symptoms. So tons of systemic inflammation, essentially. And I had to stop taking my steroids that I had to take every day to be able to function, and Plaquenil, and I still had to go in and get a steroid shot sometimes. So I had to stop taking all that because I got pregnant. And I drastically declined when I came off my medication. Not that my medication was keeping me well, it was just keeping the inflammation down, but it wasn't taking care of the root cause. So when you come off of something like that and you haven't taken care of the root cause, it's been able to like fester underneath. So it's so much worse later because it's just building, and they keep upping the meds to keep the symptoms down, but the problem's growing. So I come off my meds and like my hands are so swollen, I can't bend my fingers. Like I have like Fred Flintstone feet, they're like rounded on the bottom. So I was pregnant. My midwife came to the house. I planned on having a home delivery. I did, but she sent me to another muscle testing practitioner 10 years later, totally different one. And like within a couple of weeks, I was better. So then I started taking my kids, as a registered nurse, they're fully vaccinated. have all the problems, asthma, allergies, eczema, sick all the time, and got them detoxed, and they're like perfectly healthy. Like they don't have a single thing wrong with them now.
Yeah.
Thank God that there wasn't more long-term effects, because we know that sometimes there are like things that happen that are not completely reversible. And I'm just like grateful that in their situation it was. So I had 2 more kids. My 2 younger kids haven't had any vaccinations. They haven't even had Tylenol or Motrin or antibiotic or anything like that. And it just goes to show like the stark difference in their health. And so I've learned a lot. I came from the medical system. We did it. I did it. I put my kids through it. It didn't work. Nobody was getting better. We were all getting worse every day. And, we flipped that, and I did things completely different the next time around. And it's like, I always say, I have my own little clinical experiment here, like 2 kids that were fully vaccinated, all the antibiotics, all the steroids, all the things, allergy shots, and then 2 kids that had nothing that are perfectly healthy. I was saying earlier, I think my daughter's been to the ER. She just hasn't really been to the doctor. I was like, I think she had a fish hook in her foot we couldn't get out, and she got 5 staples in her head. Like outside of that, like I don't think that she's been. And so it's just learning and being, like you said, being open to learning. So many people just put a barrier up and they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I see this a lot in the medical field with people that don't want to have the vaccine conversation, and a lot of that comes from like guilt, because it's like, I've vaccinated my kids all the way through. What happens if what I did is wrong, or because what I did caused them to have these issues? I don't want to go down that road. And so they just block it out. But the community is changing, even in the medical community. So many doctors, it's not as widespread yet as I would like it to be, but there are doctors who are open to that, to having patients in their office that aren't vaccinated. Lots of nurses that I know personally are not vaccinating their children, which is huge.
Yeah.
Because then, they're not forcing that on their patients either. They're having that.
Sure.
If the doctor offers it, they have to offer it. But if it's declined, they're not pushing it like it used to be, like telling you you're going to kill your kid and all this kind of stuff. So I think the conversation's getting easier, which is good. But there are still some people who are just not open to it because it's different.
Yeah. Totally. Well said. All right. We have a little bit of time left. We'll definitely have to do a second.
Yeah.
So, because I feel like
2.0. Yeah.
there's like one of these 5 different things we didn't get to, but I do want to get to some of these other questions that I think everybody would appreciate your viewpoint on. So we've talked about we've even touched upon a lot of things like EMFs, sugar. We didn't talk about seed oils. We didn't really talk about air pollutants. You have touched on glyphosate, which is harsh chemicals in our food and our soil. Where do you start when you're looking at someone's health? Like when you get a client, and I know it depends, but is there like buckets of areas where you're finding the most commonality around?
As far as what's causing people to be sick?
Yeah, like where are you starting? Like, because it's like, it could be EMF, it could be a food sensitivity, It could be stress, it could be you're eating too much sugar, it could be seed oils in your food. So it's like, where are you personally starting, and how do you approach your care plans?
So we're starting with what the body tells us. And that's the good thing about what we do, is the body's going to prioritize what it wants to take care of first. And a lot of times for the first couple of weeks, that's what we call drainage. So it's getting your bowels moving, getting your liver, your gallbladder opened up, your lymphatic system moving, getting everything moving. We do not want to jump in and start detoxing when things don't have an exit and your filters are all backed up. So we start by getting all that moving, and then your body's going to prioritize what it wants to do first. And by doing that, I feel like the process is more tolerable for people. They're not going in and having these huge herx reactions and detox reactions. I'm not saying that they don't happen occasionally, because some people are really sensitive to supplements. But in general, it works really well if you just let the body tell you, like through muscle testing, through, and looking at blood work and seeing like, okay, what do we need to prioritize here? What does the body want to handle? So we start on our first visit. I always start with their supplement protocol. Yeah. And if there's any major things that come up in our consultation, like they're drinking tap water, or, they've had a big water leak and we know there's mold. Like if there's something major, we're going to tackle it. But if they're just living like a normal American citizen, I'm going to start their first visit and be like, these are your supplements. what I want you to do is if any food sensitivities show up, I'm just going to have them initially avoid just that one food. And then I just tell them like, be more conscious, like drink more water, take your supplements, start moving your body. Like that's all we're starting with. And then their next visit, a couple weeks later, we do what's called a lifestyle visit and I have a whole packet. And so I'll go through and I tell people like, it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but these are really easy things you can switch that will make a drastic difference in your health. Like switch to, Himalayan salt or Celtic salt from, regular salt, switch your seed oils to olive oil or grass-fed butter, and make sure you have, a water distiller, or where are you getting your water from? Let's get a better source. So clean air, clean food, clean water, like basic essentials. And I give them some resources to start cleaning up their personal care products. And I just tell them, don't get overwhelmed. Like when your shampoo runs out, get a better one. When you run out of makeup, replace it with something better.
Yeah.
Kick out the major offenders. Like if you're wearing perfume every day, let's stop that, Like if your deodorant has aluminum or your toothpaste has fluoride, we need to switch that out pretty quickly. The other things I'm like, let's not just raid the cabinets and go spend $1,000 replacing everything. As things run out, replace it with something better. You've been using it for this long. I mean, unless it's like a kid with eczema and we need to change the detergent. Like everybody's process looks different. What problems do you have? What do we need to change? But lifestyle wise, I just tell people like, you still get to drink your coffee in the morning. You're just drinking mold-free organic coffee, not Folgers, and you're still wearing deodorant. It just doesn't have aluminum. You're still brushing your teeth. It just doesn't have fluoride. Like it's easy. I call them swaps. Like you're just swapping one thing for another and it's decreasing your toxic load so drastically. And I feel like that's where disease comes from. Your toxic bucket gets too high. Your mitochondria function goes low. Your body doesn't know what to do. You develop disease or cancer or something along those lines. And when parents ask me like, what's the best immune booster to give my kids? I'm like, detox. Yeah. So the best thing you could do to boost their immune system is to detox them. Your toxic load is high, your immune system's low. Like there's no way around that. So.
Very insightful. Thank you for sharing. All right. 2 more things and got to wrap it up.
Yeah.
When people say provider or practitioner, it's pretty common to think of somebody in a white coat. And you have tattoos and a personality, right? So would you say you get treated differently because of that? I know you've already kind of touched on.
From a community standpoint, or?
Like she's a witch doctor in a playful way. But do you feel like that like communities look at you a different way, or patients have that thought of like, this is what a doctor should look like and you're not it? Or do you feel like it in today's world, because of social media, they can get to know you, understand your messaging, and then be like, you know what, this makes a lot of sense. And so therefore the trust is built.
I feel like the trust is built through conversation.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of conversation on social media about things and sharing my viewpoints on things. So I feel like that helps as far as like, my clients, some are a little like, if you walk into my office, like a buddy of mine came in and I walk out, his wife doesn't usually come with him, but she was with him that day. And he goes, you just lost me $20. I told her you were going to come out here drinking a cup of coffee barefoot. And so I was like, well, I mean, I was barefoot. I was like, my coffee's on my desk, And so unless I have like boots on or it's raining outside or it's really cold, I mean, usually I get to work, I take my shoes off. Like, I had an older lady that came in. She said, I thought I was going to come in here to an Indian woman sitting crisscross barefoot, smoking a peace pipe. I'm like, well, I'm Native American. I've walking around barefoot. She's like, yeah, it's like really close to what I was picturing. And she's like, you got, She's like, you got long black hair, you got holes in your jeans, I'm like, I feel like on a client level, I feel like it's actually better because I think people feel like they can relate to me more than, doctors don't usually have a relationship, with their clients. They're in and out in like 5 minutes. You build a closer, that's why I wanted to be a nurse. Like you're closer to the patient than the doctor. The doctor just comes in, writes a script or, does it, whatever. Nurses are the ones who are building relationships with people. And so I think because that's what I wanted to do. And that is, where my heart is like, they have all these strategies of like how to shorten your visits and see more people. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Right.
I mean, I spend like my follow-ups like in person are like 20 minutes and that's pushing it. I mean, we're usually like, okay, text me or send me that, whatever, sending me pictures of their kids. And like, I want to build relationships with these people. And I feel like that makes it easier.
Yeah.
And knowing that I'm just honest and like authentic with people about whether I believe something or if I don't.
Yeah.
And I don't pretend that I'm perfect. Like I tell people like I went on vacation, I ate whatever I wanted.
Right.
Like could I have done that 5 years ago? No, I would have been so sick, but like I've taken care of my body enough where like I could beat it up for a week and it was all right,
Yeah.
and not saying that I wasn't being like aware of what I was doing at all, but like if I wanted something, I ate it.
Yeah.
Gluten included, and I tell people, they're like, oh, I've had like so many clients go on, like, cruises and going over to Italy and like cruises over in Europe. And I'm like, I don't know what the trend is this year, but I've had a lot. And I tell them like, eat the bread over there. It's not the same. And they all eat it. None of them have a reaction. They feel great. They lose weight.
Yeah.
Pisses me off a little bit because I'm like, why is our country so terrible? We all want good bread, but
Good.
over there, it's not the same. And it just goes to show that, our food supply is an issue. But like I said, I'm just real with people. I'm not going to pretend that I'm perfect in every area.
Yep.
I'm not going to pretend that there's not a single toxic product in my house. I'm still working. I feel like that's a lifelong journey. Like you'll be using something and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, they were bought out by Johnson & Johnson and they put this stuff in there that wasn't in before. And then I've been using it for 6 months, one of the grocery stores that we used, all of a sudden, like I had 2 products it was the same product, one that I had bought before and one I bought, and one of them didn't. And the next one said bioengineered food.
Yeah.
So like they started doing that. The packaging looked exactly the same unless you flipped it over.
Right.
You didn't know. So it's like, you just have to keep reading labels. You can't just read it once and I'm going to like Siete brand just got bought out by Pepsi. Like, don't think for a minute, every time I buy Siete, I'm not going to flip it over and make sure they haven't changed something because they will for the profit margin. And so just being careful of that, but don't even remember how we ended up here.
It's all good.
That's the conversation. We just lead.
You came to you got to where you wanted to, which was you're authentic with everybody.
Yeah.
You tell them what you believe. And then once results are there, everybody tells everybody else and it kind of takes care of itself. So who cares?
Yeah. Word of mouth is
and
our biggest.
If you weren't authentic, then you would be putting on a show and that would portray itself.
Yeah.
But so in the long run, it's the exact strategy that's yielding you the results that you're getting.
Yeah. I had a conversation earlier today. They're like, what do you do for marketing? I'm like, word of mouth is the best. Like virtually or in person, like if you do a good job with somebody, they're going to tell somebody else.
Exactly.
And that's just how it goes. So we don't have we don't have a marketing team or, I put stuff on social media when I feel like I have something on my heart to share, but, or when I'm pissed or mad, I share that too.
Right.
about Pepsi buying the Siete. I'm like, what in the world? But I think that's part of it. Like I show people when I'm upset. I show people when I'm mad. And I show people what I love. And I let them see into my real life that I am a mom and doing all the things. And I think it just makes me more relatable than the 5 minutes you get with a doctor who doesn't want to build a relationship with you. They're just trying to run as many people through as they can. And I don't want that. So.
Makes sense. You got to know what you're dealing with to action. Okay. Very last thing. Can you talk to me about how you're using technology today to help get better patient outcomes or reduce like your administrative burden or help you with your workflows? And then on top of that, what would you like technology to do that it's not doing today?
That's interesting. So we have, I do keep paper files just because I feel like I can write faster when I'm testing. I've tried to do digital and then I went right back. All of our scheduling and, everything is, we have a app that we use for that. I would say as far as technology, we use lab work and to monitor what's going on in the patient's body.
Yeah.
And that technology through functional labs is getting even better. I always say like traditional lab work is great, but functional lab work is really where it's at, as far as like doing the peptide testing versus like Zoomers rather than food sensitivity. And as far as like technology, like getting more of my clients to use like the blood sugar monitors to see like what's going on throughout the day. And that gives insight, just like lab work. When people see something on a screen or on a piece of paper, they're like, holy shit, that's really bad. You know, when I first started monitoring mine, like I had, and I think I messaged you, I was like, why is my blood sugar spiking like 40 points when I wake up in the morning? And so I started researching like dawn phenomenon and what's causing it. And so mine was stress. My cortisol was like freaking out in the mornings. I did 7 days of cold plunges. I don't even know if I told you this. I did 7 days. I did 7 days of cold plunges. Yeah. I'm like, what is causing this? I'm like, it's my nervous system. So I just need to calm it down. So immediately when I would get up for 7 days in a row, I have a TheraFrost cold plunge machine. And so I just got in for 3 minutes. I think I did one day I did 5 or 6 and, one day I did 4, but like average, I did at least 3 minutes every day for 7 days. And it fixed it. I mean, I'd still get in a couple times a week, but doing it every single day, I realized like I was waking up and my blood sugar would spike.
Yeah.
I would have a hot flash and then my blood sugar would come down. And I was like, why am I having a hot flash? 37, what's happening? And so it had something to do, I mean, you may be able to give it more insight, but it had something to do with like when my blood sugar would hit a certain point, even after I would eat a meal, if I would eat a lot of carbs, my blood sugar would go up. And when it finally peaked, I would hot flash and my blood sugar would come down. So every hot flash I had has been because my blood sugar hit a peak right before it came down. So I don't know if you can give insight on, like, my body's just like releasing everything. I don't know. But once I did the cold plunges for 7 days, that dawn phenomenon, that spike right when I was waking up, quit. And I haven't had it since. I still cold plunge like to manage my nervous system, but just not daily. But yeah.
I think this is I guess like the point here is like always on monitoring is the only way you can catch patterns. It's really hard to catch something like, what was I doing? Like, why is this constantly happening when everything else looks fine?
Yeah.
And then it's like, it might take a week or 2 or a month. Sometimes it takes 3 to 6 months, depending on that person. But you'll catch so many things that.
Now my A1C was like 4.7. So like no doctor is going to be like, you have a blood sugar problem.
Right, exactly.
But I eat like 80% probably. Well, not when I'm traveling, but when I'm home and I'm in control of everything, 70 to 80% like carnivore, like I eat a lot of chicken and beef and eggs and cottage cheese. And then, we throw in some other like avocado, sweet potatoes, rice sometimes because my son, he's got to have rice, but, 70 to 80% are like animal protein. And I did a DNA test that showed that like my ancestors were like, hunter-gatherers versus like agricultural ancestry, which agricultural, they tend to be able to tolerate more carbs because they're eating more produce. Hunter-gatherers are more animal, nuts and meat and things like that. And so that was my ancestry. And they said like, you have a very low tolerance for carbohydrates. And nothing has been more true. If I eat, like my son eats chicken and rice a lot. If I sit down and eat chicken and rice, like a normal serving size, my blood sugar is going to hit 160, 170. And I'm like, and I get that hot flash and then it comes back down. But as long as I minimize my carbs and I pair them with fat and protein, then my blood sugar stays pretty level. So it's learning how to pair foods also, and then learning what your body tolerates. Like, I have other clients that can eat exactly what I eat and their body responds totally different. That's why I can't give somebody like, this is the diet I recommend for everybody. You just can't do that. And so learning how your body responds to specific foods and pairing specific foods is really important. So I would say outside of the functional blood work, that's probably one of the more, helpful things that we use to give insight on diet and exercise. So I'll throw that in. I went for a run farther than I was going to go farther than I normally do. And so I did this on Instagram. I'm like, I'm taking screenshots of my blood sugar the whole time. So you have 20 minutes of a glycogen store, like, that. So after 20 minutes, if you're not taking in any kind of carbs or sugar, your blood sugar is going to drop. So of course I take in carbs right before I go run. I ate a peanut butter and banana with honey because I'm like, I'm going to go, I need this sugar because I'm going to go run. So I eat it. While I'm driving to the trail, my blood sugar's just climbing. I think it hit like 130, 134 and I take off. And so it immediately levels out. And after about 15, 20 minutes, it starts to go down. And it hit like 52, 54 from 134. And I only ran for 38 minutes. And so I'm like, because I was going to go further. So I had like carb loaded up and my body just burnt right through it. And so that just goes to show like, was I really tired or did my body run out of fuel? And so if I take in some kind of carbohydrates while I'm running, it drastically changes the game. Right. Now I can run further. I can lift more. Like my lifts in the gym, if I take in carbs before I go in, crazy. Yeah. If I have just been like eating my normal like meat and eggs and whatever, and I go to the gym, like I can have a good day at the gym. But like if I take in carbs and go into the gym, my blood sugar doesn't spike because I'm immediately starting to burn it off. Yeah. And I can lift so much more and I can stay in the gym so much longer.
Yeah.
And enjoy it more because I'm not whipped when I leave, So it just really like long-term health, like figuring out what your body needs. If you're going into the gym and you're doing something for 20 minutes or you're running and then your blood sugar's tanking, that's why you can't make it through your workout. That's why you're not seeing any progress because your body's literally running out of ATP and energy. There's no repeatability. There's no cycling of that. So I think it's been one of the single best things I have seen that actually shows that my cortisol, when I'm stressed, spikes my blood sugar. And so outside of, carbs, cortisol is my main trigger. So when I'm stressed, my blood sugar just shoots up and I'm like, oh, that's what happens in my body.
Can't unsee it, right?
You can't. You can't.
Amazing. We're going to wrap up here, Lakrista. Let everybody know, where can they find you? What's the best place to connect with you? And, what would be a scenario where somebody would want to work with you?
Yeah. So my Instagram is at Lakrista O'dell. That's probably the most common place that people contact me. My website is nativewellnessllc.com. And we see everybody. We see a lot of kids that their parents just want to do a vaccine detox or parasite cleanse, that they're generally healthy. They just have something minor like eczema, parasites, whatever. We work with a lot of kids. When it comes to adults, people will say like, what's the main thing that you work with? Do you mainly work with hormones? Do you mainly work with, Lyme or what? And I'm like, when people come to us, they don't know what the hell is wrong. They've been to all the doctors, they've been to all the specialists. Everybody tells them their labs look great. So we really work with everybody. A lot of times when people are going doctor to doctor and they know that something's wrong, you can't stop advocating for yourself. You have to find somebody that's going to listen to you. Almost, I would say 80% of my clients on their consultation, they'll be like, I know this sounds crazy, or don't think I'm crazy. Like they preface whatever's wrong with them with that because they've been made to think that what they're saying cannot be true.
Right.
Like you can't be that tired. Your thyroid looks fine. Well, there's a whole lot of other reasons why I could be tired. And so they're like, I'm not crazy, but this is what's happening. And I'm like, no, I believe you. And that's where people are like, oh, I'm like, no, I really like crazier things have happened. They're like, I'm so tired all day, but I can't sleep at night. Yeah. You're not crazy. That happens. Your nervous system switched. Your nervous system's backwards. And they're like, what does that even mean? And why does my doctor not know about this? So there's a lot of things that I would just say, like, if you're wanting to just get healthy long-term, like we have a lot of people that just schedule and they're like, I don't have anything really wrong with me. I just want to make sure that I'm the healthiest that I can be. And I know there are things that I'm missing. And so, we'll do some labs and see what we need to work on. Everybody has something. Nobody's ever come to me. I'll be like, you're perfect. You need nothing. Like that's never happened. Because everybody needs something. Yeah. And so that's what we do. Find out what they need.
Perfect. Well, it was amazing having you. I'm sure we'll have you again. There's like I said, 20 different pockets of things we could have done with.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on and we'll do it again.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Awesome.